Hey everybody, it's Fox. Welcome back to my channel and apparently to the tour of my entire house because I can't decide on where I want to film today. So I decided, hey, I'm going to film in my office because why not? Last time I filmed in my hammock, you know, free game. You never know where I'm gonna be. Anyways, in the past few videos, you've seen me working on my SYLVIE cosplay that I'm going to be hopefully taking to DragonCon. I really wanted to tackle a technique that I, for some reason, have never tried before, and that was how I'm going to wrap all of these flaps in faux leather. Let's get on to the supplies that you're going to need for this method. We're going to need a can of contact cement, a silicone brush to apply the contact cement with, or a piece of scrap foam or a brush, a pair of scissors, and preferably you should have a pair of fabric scissors as well as a pair of scissors that you don't necessarily mind getting gummed up by contact cement. You'll also need your piece of armor that you want to wrap in fabric. If it helps you out, you can grab some pattern weights. I just use these washers that I bought from Lowe's. When it comes to supplies, the most important thing is going to be the fabric that you select. What you should be on the lookout for is a type of faux leather or a leather-esque fabric that has at least a little bit of give, like a 2 or 4-way stretch. The fabric I'm using is by Yaya Han, and it's her ultra premium fabric, and it's not really a faux leather but more like a hybrid of leather and a stretch fabric. Upholstery leathers and stiffer such fabrics can work for this method too, but you're probably going to want to stick to flat pieces of foam, kind of like what I've got here for SYLVIE, because if they don't really have stretch, they're really not going to be able to curve around complex curves or anything. With all that criteria that I just listed out, I do think that the most important thing that you really should be looking for in a fabric, it needs to be able to soak or hold on to contact cement without bleeding through the fabric. So something like a stretch cotton, or you know, like there's some sports fabrics like sports lycra, that really wouldn't work, and I wouldn't recommend using this method for that, because if it seeps through your fabric, it'll look a little bit splotchy and it just won't lay right and it won't look right. Hopefully I've given you enough context clues to go out to Joann's or your fabric store of choice and figure out a good fabric that would work for you and your project. To start, you're just going to take your piece of EVA foam that you would like to wrap and place it right side down onto your desired fabric, with your fabric facing right side down as well. This term right side refers to the side of the foam or fabric you want to show when putting your piece together. Lay some pattern weights down on your foam and cut around your pattern with about an inch or so seam allowance like I'm doing. If you want, you can trace your seam allowance with a Sharpie or some tailor's chalk. If you're not as go-getting as I am with my scissors, I just don't care. I just want to get it over with. And your seam allowance here will be important when we wrap the fabric later. You should be left with 2 pieces now, your foam piece and a slightly larger piece of your fabric. For your next step, break out your contact cement and a silicone brush to apply it with, and lay your fabric piece with the right side down and your foam piece to the side with the right side facing up. And we're going to paint a layer of contact cement onto our foam and to the piece of fabric. Now obviously the fabric is naturally going to soak up a little bit more of the contact cement than the foam, so just do as best as you can to get an even layer on your fabric. I found that I like to paint the entire piece in contact cement, as this helps in the process later. Give your contact cement around 10 to 15 minutes to dry, and if you like, you can go ahead and paint on a second coat. I like to do this because it just feels like there's a tighter bond than just with one, but you can experiment here and see what works best for you. Once your 2 sides are sufficiently tacky and ready to stick together, take your EVA foam and carefully place it into the middle of your fabric piece and smooth it down. I like to go from the middle to the edges. Try your best to ease out any of the bubbles that you may have formed in the process, and you may need to massage the fabric a little bit if you have a complex shape. Don't worry too much if you still have some bubbles that you can't get out, because with the next step we should hopefully correct that. Now that the bulk of your foam is glued down to the fabric, it's time to take care of that seam allowance on the outside. Flip over your piece so that you can see where your foam is at, and take a pair of scissors, preferably a pair that you don't mind getting gummed up, and cut slits all along the edges of your fabric, being careful not to cut all the way too close to your foam. Cutting these slits will allow us to wrap the fabric onto the back of the foam later in a more uniform fashion, and hopefully ease out some of those bubbles and allow the fabric to sit more naturally. Once all of your slits are cut out, you'll want to paint on a layer of contact cement to this side of the foam, and if you didn't paint cement onto the fabric before, this is the time. As you can see, this is why I didn't like doing it this way, because whenever you paint the cement onto those little flaps, they kind of curl up on themselves and it's really annoying, and I wasn't a fan of it, so I ended up doing it on the seam allowance before I cut everything. And again, let that contact cement dry for 10 to 15 minutes and paint on a second layer if you like. Now all that you need to do is take your slits of fabric and wrap them onto the foam as I'm showing here. Don't wrap too tight as you risk distorting your foam, and not too loose as well, because you might end up getting all these wrinkly and sad looking things. I like to save the corner work for last because I'm admittedly not good at it, and I don't think I did a corner the same on any of my pieces, but basically what I did was I either cut away the excess fabric here and there, and I was gluing it down sometimes with either contact cement or super glue, or you can get really super fancy and do some folding before you glue things down. I'm not super fancy, so clearly I didn't do that. Now that everything is covered in faux leather, I could just go to my base piece and start contact cementing these onto there, but as you know, I like to just make my life harder, and I actually ended up top stitching all of these flaps because I wanted to give them a little bit more spice, I guess. And I also ended up painting them green because obviously everything in my life just needs to be more green. But you're gonna see all of that of me finishing up Sylvie's breastplate in a future video. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and especially for hanging on until the end of the video, and I will catch you guys in next Thursday's video. Bye! Usually whenever I say bye, I will hear Brian like saying it in the living room. I did not hear him say that time.
And then the wing hussars arrived!
Do you want to say that in English?
Don't matter.